All right, Laurelville, we're gonna help you get ready for the mud. A lot of questions every single year about I don't know what to wear in the mud. This is the definitive how to get dressed for the mud guide from PKF Camps. So pay attention. It's all about layers, all right? Just like you're going for a hike, and it's gonna be weather dependent, temperature dependent. We're going to pretend that it's kind of cold today, even though it's like 75 degrees out here right now. Friend Maddie here is gonna be sweating by the end of this as she layers up for a pretend cold day in the mud, but all about layers. Your first layer is your maybe most important. It's gonna be your base layer. Super important that your base layer is something more than just your underpants, because ideally you'll go from the mud pit, you'll get cleaned up from the mud, and then walk to your cabin or your room or your housing unit in your base layer. Ideally, if you do this right, your base layer is not going to have any mud on it at all. So base layers should provide some insulation. It should be something wicking, like a synthetic fabric. Think Under Armour or the Turkey Trot, like running long sleeve tee from that time that your sister was like, hey, we should do the Turkey Trot this year, and you were like, I don't think that's a great idea. I don't want to wake up on Thanksgiving early and run 5K, but she was like, no, it'll be a lot of fun. You should do it anyways, and I'm going to do it. And then you did it, and it was as little fun as you expected. Something like that could work too. Compression shorts, leggings, stuff like that, running tights, all great options for base layers. The warmer it is outside, the lighter you can go on your base layer. The colder it is outside, you can go a little bit warmer, a little bit more insulation on your base layer. Expect to be able to keep your base layer after you're done playing in the mud. Now your next layer after the base layer is the mid layer. Not because it's mid, because it's the middle of the layers. The primary purpose of the mid layer is to keep the majority of mud away from your base layer. Some examples would be an old hoodie, old sweatshirts, old sweatpants, Goodwill finds, old clothes that you're okay throwing away afterwards. Because again, the primary purpose of the mid layer is to keep mud away from the base layer. Now your next layer is the mud-proof membrane. This is a super important layer because it blocks the majority of mud from getting to your mid layer and your base layer. Examples of the mud-proof membrane, think like Tyvek suit, painter's suit, hazmat style suits with the hood, but beware, these tend to break pretty easily and rip, and if your mud-proof membrane rips, then everything underneath that membrane layer is going to get wet and covered in mud. And I know you're probably thinking, it doesn't matter if the mud-proof membrane rips because I've got sleeve holes where my arms stick out. Well, don't worry about it. We'll cover that in a second. Now your final layer is the outer layer. And this is really simply for fashion, style points, but it serves a purpose by protecting that mud-proof membrane. Examples of an outer layer could be an ugly Christmas sweater, or your homecoming dress, or a tuxedo that you had to wear for your cousin's wedding. Some folks decide to skip out on the outer layer altogether, and they just roll with their mud-proof membrane as their outer layer. And a lot of times what we see is that elbows rip, the common like tear points rip, knees, joints, elbows, stuff like that. If your mud-proof membrane rips, then everything underneath it is at risk of getting super muddy and wet. Let's talk tape for your seams and your seals. You've got holes where your arms come out and holes for your feet. And so we'll use some duct tape to lock those in. Now when you're taping your seams, what we recommend doing is, especially on the arms here, we'd put the mud-proof membrane, in this case the Tyvek suit, beneath. We tuck that into the gloves and then do a couple wraps of duct tape. Fatal mistake that a lot of people make when they tape their friends into their suits is they don't leave a tab on the duct tape. What's a tab, you ask? Here's a tab I prepared earlier. What that does is when it's covered in mud, we don't have to cut this tape off anymore. For footwear, we're always going to recommend some sort of rubber, waterproof or water resistant at the very least, sort of footwear. You thought I wasn't going to leave a tab, didn't you? Always leave a tab. And now she's ready to go.
Oh, that is so muddy. The mud is a great time at Mud Weekends. Hope to see you there.